All right, so I am a graduate student researching Russian literature, and today I thought I would talk about one of the most greatest works of fiction of all time, and that is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, this is about a abusive father who gets murdered, presumably by one of his sons, and I'm not going to say who, but in case that doesn't sound enticing enough for you, I want to talk a bit about why I think everybody should read this. Now, Brothers Karamazov is groundbreaking when it comes to novel writing, like the evolution of novel writing in itself. And that's because Dostoevsky blends, or I suppose he integrates religious tropes into secular fiction. So he kind of blends these two. And there's also a very intricate structure. There are lots of stories and subplots, and this is characteristic of Dostoevsky. One of the most famous literary critics, Mikhail Bakhtin, wrote, he called this dialogism, and that is when essentially characters engage in dialogue, or just through the novel there's a multiplicity of voices. So the writer doesn't push one perspective on you. He just presents you with a bunch of different ones and lets the reader decide for themselves whose worldview they identify with the most. Now, there are three heroes of this novel, and they are the three Karamazov brothers. So that's Dmitri, a soldier, Alyosha, who's a monk, and then Ivan, who's an intellectual. There's also a fourth brother, actually, and he is the illegitimate son of the dad and a servant woman, and so he's called Smerdyakov by his own surname, and he's not directly acknowledged to be kin to the other brothers, but everybody knows it, and he lives as a servant in the father's household. Now, the main reason I think anybody should read this novel, honestly, is for the character Ivan's worldview. And essentially, he poses a lot of questions about God and morality and humanity, and he forces you to think about the undeniable widespread existence of evil and what this means for religion, for oneself. So now I think it's time to talk about some literary context that'll help you in your reading, just stuff that I picked up throughout my studies of this book. And I want to pose a few key questions that you should think about. Now, what, if anything, do the Karamazovs represent? Because after this novel came out, the term became widely popular in Russia, the translation of which is Karamazovism or Karamazovness, and it's this kind of distinctive quality. It's a mesh of a few different things. I don't want to tell you outright what people generally agree that it means, because I think it's fun for you to try and figure it out yourself and pay attention to the similarities between all the brothers and what they inherit from the father. Who gets to be a Karamazov is another key question. I already mentioned that Smerdyakov is a bastard son. And another thing, one of the brothers poses this question about the father, and that is, why is such a man alive? Now, this is asked quite early on in the novel. Why is such a man alive? So if you've read Crime and Punishment, you'll see kind of this echo of Raskolnikov's thinking, the way he thinks about his landlady, Alyona Ivanovna. Why is such a woman alive? Why does evil and sin get to just exist in the form of this human being? How come they get to go on living? Why? Now, I also urge you to pay attention to names. Names in Russian novels are always important. So Dmitri is referred to as Mitya and Alexei as Alyosha. Now, these are diminutives of their actual names, and these are used to reflect affection. They're often used with children, but they get nicknames. Ivan doesn't. Ivan never becomes Vanya, not to any of them. And this reflects his distance from his family, his aloofness. Ivan is really proud and independent. He is, like I said, an intellectual, and he is connected to the discussion in the novel about this tension between church and state, which is mirrored in the novel structure as secular and religious. Now, Ivan's written in a way, I think, that really makes you ask, is there any authenticity to this person, or are they just kind of a moody poser? He's quite an enigma, not just to me or readers, but to his brothers. Children in this novel convey the broad social collapse going on in the town. So their problems, the problems that children experience, are problems adults experience. And there's a character named Kostya who is sort of Ivan's double. And through Kostya, Dostoevsky critiques the radical youth, but he also shows some sympathy to them. So pay attention to the kids in this novel, the ones that are completely unrelated to the Karamazov family, but happen to live in the same town. Now, children are also part of the core argument that Ivan makes against religion, because he asks, how can God be real if he allows even one innocent child to suffer? Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but Dostoevsky answers this question. You should pay attention to what happens to the children in the town at the novel's end, and also, obviously, what becomes of Ivan. But I find Ivan's rebellion against religion to be very, very persuasive, actually. He challenges his brother Alyosha's faith. He asks, key questions that I think everyone struggles with. How can God be real if so much abuse and suffering exists? So Ivan, he wants to see this evil punished on earth. He wants retribution for these crimes. He's not willing to wait for the afterlife to see that happen. Yeah, so I think atheists will find a lot of relatability here. Now, what's really important is that Ivan frames his philosophy through a story, through an epic poem called The Grand Inquisitor. And the chapter in which he relays the story to Alyosha, I believe, is really, really hard to read, because Dostoevsky writes in a way that imitates biblical apocryphal legend. So it's very kind of dense, but I hope that I've given you enough context about what it is that he's trying to actually say here for you to be able to get through this subplot, because it's a lot. I've got to say, I think when I first read this book, I was completely turned off just by the Grand Inquisitor plotline. Now, finally, I want to end with a word on female characters in this book. So heterosexual relationships in Dostoevsky's fiction tend to adhere to a master-slave dialectic. And this essentially means that one partner is always obsessed with wielding power over the other. Now, usually that's, men over women, but we actually see that dynamic reversed quite a bit here. So we have Katerina, this is Mitya's fiance. And the way they meet, this is revealed very early on. So essentially her father was in debt to Mitya, and Mitya shows up in her bedroom one night and says, listen, if you sleep with me, I'll give you a ton of money and you can pay off your father's debts. And she consents to this because there's really no other choice for her family. She has to save them. And she obviously hates Mitya so much. He put her in this humiliating position where she essentially prostituted herself. But the way that she copes with that trauma is she actually funnels that hatred into love for him. She convinces herself that no, that was the start of a big love story. He saved her family, and she wants to be with him. She wants to be engaged to him. And we see how that plays out in the novel for both of them. The next female character that wields a lot of power actually is Grushenka. Now, Grushenka is kind of this plump, rosy, cute prostitute in essence, but she's constantly manipulating men to get what she wants, to get her version of freedom that she is able to attain. Just given her lower station in life, she can't be haughty and noble the way Katerina is. She has to resort to kind of different tactics. And lastly, there is Lise. So Lise is an invalid. She is disabled, and she is the kind of classic, stereotypical, hysterical invalid. And she is in love with Alyosha, the youngest brother, who is really a good guy, but she doesn't know how to make him love her without manipulating him. So first she wants him to take pity on her, and then she starts telling him some really disturbing, creepy fantasies she's been having in her dreams, to kind of make him fear her. And yeah, so these are, I don't know, I'm obsessed with the women in this novel, and I think that this is just a book. This is a book that has something for everybody. And yeah, Dostoevsky can be tough to get through, but if you do, there's definitely some gems here, gems of characters, of plot lines that will stay with you absolutely forever. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy reading. Thanks again so much for watching. And since I'm still pretty new to YouTube, I would greatly appreciate any feedback in the comments below if there's a particular kind of video you want to see, or if there's something you wish I would focus on more in my videos. I would really greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much and take care. Bye-bye.